Well, yeah, he's been going on the success of Watergate for 40 years, but seldom have people looked into all the questions, that have been brought up by a lot of his claims in some of his previous books. I mean, they're literally going on Woodward is a credible guy because he had some success in journalism, but they're not looking at all the credible people who have questioned some of his dubious claims, much like the existence of Deep Throat, who was his source for Watergate. James Rosen, a historian, a Watergate historian, has questioned even if that person exists. He made a claim about Reagan's recovery in 1981 that, he was so weak and incoherent during his recovery. Reagan's own doctors disputed that. Now you have James Mattis coming out disputing his claims about not wanting to follow Trump's orders. So people don't want to focus on that, particularly in the mainstream media now on the eve of his book release.
Right. I mean, that's a pretty significant doubt, I guess, a pretty significant person to have a doubt. So that's Woodward's former editor at the Washington Post by the name of Ben Bradlee said publicly, that he was all on board with Woodward, that Woodward was credible, but then privately he doubted some of the elements, including whether the existence of Deep Throat was an accurate portrayal or an embellishment. And I guess applying that same sort of doubt to this book, Fear, there's a pretty big difference between an accurate claim by a journalist of some of these stories in the book Fear versus an embellishment. That's pretty significant.
It's very significant, and I mean, people aren't looking at the financial incentives that Bob Woodward has. I mean, his goal here is to sell books. He did it with Watergate, where Ben Bradlee questioned all those meetings in the parking garage, how he met with his source, and so on. It seems like he embellishes these things to up his book sales, and he's just been riding the credibility he has from the Watergate investigation. The same thing's happening now. We saw Michael Wolff come out with a book, Omarosa come out with a book, and it looks like Bob Woodward just wants to ride that wave.
Right, I'd already forgotten about Omarosa's book, to be perfectly honest. So there's actually something from recently, too, not just as far back as Watergate. In 2013, Woodward accused Gene Sperling of trying to intimidate him. Gene Sperling was a staffer in the Obama administration. He said over email, Sperling was horrible to him. Later on, that email exchange that Woodward was talking about was released, and everybody who read it was kind of like, really, dude? This you think is intimidating behavior, especially coming from White House?
Right, so his dishonesty seems to be bipartisan to some degree, which leads me to conclude that he has financial incentives to do this. And you have to understand too, during this time, I mean, there's so much anti-Trump sentiment. You see digital subscriptions for the New York Times and the Washington Post are way up. People actually, I think 5 people used to watch MSNBC when President Obama was in office. Now about 10 people watch it. So there's a ton of anti-Trump sentiment, and I know that Bob Woodward wants to capitalize on that, and his history kind of proves it.